Alright, strapping in, because this is going to be a war on words. No intro, no easing in. We go straight for the throat. They want you to believe this was just another attack. They want you to believe this was business as usual. They want you to believe Drew McIntyre should have seen it coming. But that lie is exactly why this moment on SmackDown deserves to be torn apart, frame by frame, bone by bone, because what Jacob Fatu did the second time wasn't chaos, it was a message written in violence. And before we go any further, let me ask you something simple: yes or no, drop it in the comments right now. Was Drew McIntyre betrayed by the system, or did he walk straight into his own destruction? Because February 6, 2026 didn't just give us a highlight. It gave us a line in the sand, and Jacob Fatu crossed it without blinking. Drew McIntyre was already broken before the second attack ever happened. Not physically, mentally. That first ambush earlier in the night, that wasn't just about pain. That was about distraction. Drew limped, sure, but more importantly, he hesitated. And if you know anything about Jacob Fatu, hesitation is blood in the water. SmackDown cameras caught Drew pacing backstage later, jaw tight, eyes glassy, trying to convince himself he was still in control. He kept touching his neck, his ribs, not because they hurt but because his mind was replaying that first impact again and again. Quick question for you: be honest, when was the last time Drew McIntyre looked truly confident on SmackDown? Exactly. Now here's where it turns from intense to infuriating. Because WWE officials knew Jacob Fatu was still in the building. They knew the first attack wasn't enough. And yet, Drew McIntyre was allowed to walk to the ring later that night alone. No backup, no protection, no warning. And that's when the second attack detonated. The lights didn't even flicker. No dramatic cue, no music, just impact. Jacob Fatu didn't run. He didn't sneak. He appeared like a natural disaster wearing boots. 1 second Drew was mid-sentence, trying to rally the crowd, trying to remind everyone who he used to be. And the next second his spine was folding under a Samoan drop that echoed like a gunshot. Let this sink in. Drew never saw him. Comment this real quick: do surprise attacks make moments better, or do they rob wrestlers of dignity? Because what followed wasn't just an attack, it was excessive, and that's putting it lightly. Jacob Fatu didn't stop after one move. He didn't stop after two. He stopped when he decided Drew had learned the lesson. Headbutt. Corner splash, running senton, and every single move felt slower than it should have, like Jacob wanted Drew awake for all of it. Here's what nobody is talking about, and this is where the anger should kick in. The crowd was split. Some were chanting for Drew, others were chanting for Fatu. Let that marinate. A former world champion, one of the most physically imposing figures WWE has ever built, was getting mixed reactions while being dismantled. So I want your take on this: has Drew McIntyre lost the crowd, or has the crowd evolved past him? Because Jacob Fatu feeds on that doubt. Watch his body language. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking. He looked comfortable. Like this ring, this chaos, this broken Scottish warrior beneath him, it all made sense. Then came the moment that turned discomfort into rage. Fatu backed into the corner, measured Drew, and hit another splash after Drew was already motionless. That wasn't necessary. That wasn't strategy. That was disrespect. Let's talk psychology, because this wasn't random. Jacob Fatu didn't attack Drew twice because he hates him. He attacked him twice because one attack doesn't rewrite history. Drew McIntyre has lived off reputation for years. The chosen one, the warrior, the man who carried WWE. Jacob Fatu doesn't care. The second attack was about erasing myth, about telling everyone watching this era is over. So answer this in the comments, no essays, just one word. Was this about dominance or humiliation? Because there's a difference, and Jacob Fatu knows it. Officials finally poured into the ring like it mattered, like the damage wasn't already done, like Drew's ribs weren't already screaming. And Jacob? He didn't fight them, didn't argue, didn't even look rushed. He stood over Drew McIntyre's body and smiled. That smile is what should haunt you. Because it wasn't a villain's grin, it was satisfaction. Now let's flip the lens, because Drew McIntyre's reaction afterward is just as damning. As medics checked him, Drew waved them off. Tried to stand, failed. Tried again, failed harder. And the crowd saw it. That image, the mighty warrior unable to rise, is going to live forever. So here's a tough one for you. Should Drew have stayed down, or did trying to stand make it worse? Because pride has consequences. Backstage later, cameras caught Jacob Fatu being asked why he attacked Drew again. He didn't raise his voice, didn't explain himself. He said one sentence: "This is what happens when you don't finish the job. Let that burn." Because that wasn't just aimed at Drew. That was aimed at everyone. Here's where things get uncomfortable for Drew fans. The second attack didn't feel like a feud escalation. It felt like a replacement. Jacob Fatu didn't just attack Drew McIntyre, he occupied his space. Main event aura, physical intimidation, unquestioned danger. The question WWE doesn't want you asking is this: did Jacob Fatu just take Drew McIntyre's spot? Because moments like this don't happen in isolation, they shift power. Let's rewind to the first attack briefly, because it matters more now. The first attack hurt Drew's body, the second attack hurt his legacy. That's why it was worse. That's why it lingered. And that's why fans are still arguing about it. Some say Drew deserved it for running his mouth, for clinging to relevance, for refusing to evolve. Others say Jacob crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed twice in one night. So settle it right now in the comments. Whose fault was the second attack, Jacob Fatu's or WWE's? Because here's the thing nobody can deny. Jacob Fatu didn't break the rules. He broke Drew. And WWE let it happen. By the time SmackDown went off the air, Drew McIntyre was gone from the arena. Jacob Fatu, still there, still standing, still undefeated in presence. That visual alone tells you everything you need to know about where this is heading. So now the real question isn't what happened, it's what happens next. Does Drew McIntyre come back angrier than ever, leaner, meaner, more desperate? Or does he come back broken, chasing a ghost he can't outrun? And does Jacob Fatu wait? Or does he strike again, before Drew even heals? Drop your prediction below. Who wins the next encounter, Drew or Jacob? Because February 6, 2026 wasn't just a highlight, it was a warning. Jacob Fatu doesn't attack twice by accident. And Drew McIntyre just learned that the hard way. Now tell me honestly, did this moment make you respect Jacob Fatu more or feel sorry for Drew McIntyre? Let the arguments begin. Ring Rumble is watching. Good, because this story doesn't slow down, and neither are we. Because sympathy is dangerous in professional wrestling. The moment fans start feeling sorry for you, that's the moment predators smell weakness. And Jacob Fatu, he doesn't smell weakness. He hunts it. That second attack rewired how everyone sees Drew McIntyre, whether they want to admit it or not. Because power in WWE isn't about strength anymore, it's about control of the narrative. And on February 6, 2026, Jacob Fatu hijacked the story in real time. Let me ask you something uncomfortable, answer honestly. When Drew McIntyre comes back, do you expect revenge or excuses? Because that expectation alone tells you how far he's fallen. Think about Drew's last few years. Big matches, big entrances, big promises. But when it matters most, someone else steals the moment. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, now Jacob Fatu. Patterns don't lie. And that's why the second attack mattered more than the first. It confirmed a trend Drew has been desperately trying to outrun. Let's talk about the silence. After Jacob Fatu left the ring, there was no triumphant music, no commentary shouting catchphrases, just an uneasy quiet. That silence is worse than boos, worse than chants, because silence means people are processing, and what they were processing was simple. Drew McIntyre didn't look like the final boss anymore. He looked like a checkpoint. So answer this: is Drew McIntyre still main event material in 2026, yes or no? No maybes. No nostalgia. Now zoom in on Jacob Fatu again, because this wasn't reckless violence. It was calculated dominance. Notice how he didn't use a chair, didn't go for blood, didn't risk disqualification. He beat Drew McIntyre cleanly, twice, with nothing but his body. That sends a message louder than any weapon ever could. It says, I don't need shortcuts to end you. And that's what should scare the locker room. Because if Jacob Fatu is willing to do this to Drew, a former world champion, a company pillar, a man WWE trusted to carry the brand, then what does that mean for everyone else? Drop this in the comments. Who should be Jacob Fatu's next target? Because whoever you name might not survive it. Let's address the elephant in the room: Drew's response, or lack of one. No social media firestorm, no cryptic promo, no vow of vengeance, nothing. And in wrestling, silence is rarely strategic, it's usually shock. Drew didn't look angry when he was helped out. He looked confused, like a man realizing his armor didn't work anymore. That's terrifying. Now imagine being Drew McIntyre backstage the next week. Every conversation stops when you walk in. Every glance lingers a little too long. Not out of respect, out of curiosity. They're all wondering the same thing you are. Is he still that guy? So I'll ask you directly, if you were Drew, what would you do next? Demand a rematch or disappear for a while? Because both choices are dangerous. Meanwhile, Jacob Fatu is ascending. He didn't need a title, didn't need a win-loss graphic. One night, 2 attacks, 1 broken legend. That's how stars are made. And the worst part? Jacob Fatu didn't even look like he hit his limit. He looked like he'd just warmed up. Let's get real for a second. This wasn't WWE protecting Jacob Fatu. This was WWE betting on him. You don't sacrifice Drew McIntyre's aura unless you're building something bigger in its place. So here's the question nobody wants to answer. Did WWE just choose Jacob Fatu over Drew McIntyre? Because if the answer is yes, then Drew's clock is ticking. Think about how this ends. If Drew comes back too fast, still hurt, still shaken, Jacob finishes the job. If Drew waits too long, Jacob moves on, and Drew becomes irrelevant. There is no safe path. That's what makes this feud lethal. And don't ignore the crowd reaction again because it's shifting. The longer Jacob stands tall, the louder the cheers get. The longer Drew stays silent, the weaker his support becomes. Fans don't abandon heroes because they lose. They abandon them when they stop believing. So be honest with yourself, do you still believe Drew McIntyre can beat Jacob Fatu? Here's something that should really make you angry. The second attack didn't even headline the show. It should have. But WWE moved on. Like Drew McIntyre getting dismantled wasn't shocking anymore. That's how normalized his suffering has become. And that should tell you everything about where he stands. Jacob Fatu, on the other hand, left SmackDown bigger than he arrived. No title, no promo time, just destruction. And sometimes that's all it takes. So let's project forward. Picture this. Drew McIntyre returns. Music hits. Crowd pops out of habit. He grabs a mic, tries to sound confident, tries to sound dangerous. And then Jacob Fatu's music hits. Who do you believe in that moment? Drop it in the comments right now. Who feels more real, Drew or Jacob? Because wrestling lives and dies on believability. February 6, 2026 will be remembered for one reason. It exposed the gap between who Drew McIntyre was and who Jacob Fatu is becoming. And gaps like that don't close easily. So don't call it just another attack. Don't call it a highlight. Call it what it was. A warning shot. A takeover. A changing of the guard. Jacob Fatu didn't attack Drew McIntyre twice to hurt him. He did it to replace him. And now the entire WWE universe is watching to see if Drew has anything left to say about it. Final question, make it count. Is this the beginning of Jacob Fatu's era or the end of Drew McIntyre's? Sound off. Because Ring Rumble is far from finished.